Well, Cary Grant was an iconic figure, beloved and lusted after by the entire world. And I thought any actor would be an idiot to try and do that and play him. But then I read the scripts, and they weren't about Cary Grant. They're about Archie Leach, who was a very damaged, very scarred man who really never healed the wounds of his childhood. And it chronicled particularly a marriage to Dyan, where all of his control issues and his anger and difficulty he had with relationships came to play. And we watched the meltdown of a human being, and that felt like something an actor could do. And that's when I said yes.
Yeah, I thought he had many layers, and I thought you did a great job. Dyan, was it what was the most gratifying aspects of bringing this out into the screen?
The most gratifying aspect, I think, had a lot to do with Jeff Pope, who wrote it. Jeff came to me about 10 years ago, wanting to option my book, Dear Cary, for a movie. And as over the 10 years, it evolved into a 4-hour miniseries. And I have to tell you, and not just because he's sitting right next to me, but Jason caught the heart, not just of Cary, but of Archie. He understands who the man was, and his performances. He nailed it. He nailed Cary.
I think he was a very troubled man, a very damaged man, and that stuff for an actor, that's a feast for an actor. Dyan chronicles beautifully in her book both this wonderful person she fell in love with and who he became once the front door closed and the marriage started to go wrong. And it's a very universal story. You must have been times you thought it was never going to happen after 10 years.
No,
really?
I didn't. But I wasn't sure. But Jeff he was so persistent, kept going, and he's amazing, an amazing writer, and all the actors are good. But it's about Cary and this man. You can't act that kind of part unless you really understand what that kind of pain is.
Yeah, well, I think, I was going to say, give each other compliments. It's going to be nauseating for anybody watching, but thank you very much. But I think that you wrote it. I got from your book, I understood how awful it was for this young woman. I started picturing you as one of my daughters. What would happen if one of my daughters married someone much older, the whole world was in love with, and had no idea who he really was? Because he really wasn't anything like, it seemed to me, he was the polar opposite, once you got married, of the character that the world fell in love with.
Obviously, he lived in a different era where the film industry was very not like today. Which would you say are the biggest difference between being a movie star then and being a movie star now, if any?
I don't know if you can hide your private life that well now. He didn't give interviews. He certainly wouldn't be doing this in a room anywhere. Right. And I've struggled to find, there are no recorded interviews with him anywhere. I managed to find one illicit recording. So you could be someone entirely different off screen than you were on screen. I don't know if you can hide that much today.
I agree.
How much was he the impact of his childhood in his when he was an adult? How much of an impact was that for Cary to be looking for love all the time or being accepted? I think.
Oh, how difficult was it?
How much of an impact was it?
Oh,
how much of an impact was it for him, the childhood that he had?
It was everything, isn't it? Isn't for all of us?
I think it propelled everything he did. Everything he did was as a result of trying to forget and covering. I think he masked it really well. Jason, talk about how he patterned himself from so many different actors along the way.
I think he just was so unloved, felt so unloved. He was so abandoned. He was so abused. He was so desperate and neglected and violently abused. Maybe even in other ways, that he needed to find some way of making people love him. And he became very good at making people love him and want him. And when he was a young actor, he stole a bit of one person's voice. The way Douglas Fairbanks put his hand in his pocket, he took style from the actors who were big at the time. He took his very dark skin. He wanted to be always dark brown from somebody else. And he built this kind of Frankensteinian creature that he honed until it became the icon that the world fell in love with. But it wasn't him until it became partly him. He just wanted to feel lovable. And eventually he got the whole world to love him, and it didn't work. Of course, that doesn't fix a hole. It's only when he had his daughter, I think, that he began to find any kind of sense of what it's like to love someone purely.
He wrote the script and wrote the leading part and played it all, did it all, wrote it all, invented it all. But I must tell you,
We should put
underneath
that on the
all,
poster. That's really good. Oh my God.
underneath it all, Jason and Jeff have really helped me have revelations about what happened back then, because it took me a long time to heal. The minute we married, it changed. And I think that because Cary was abandoned, left alone as a kid, nobody wanted him. No one. That's a terrible feeling.
And
And
he
I
was
think,
hungry. He was literally
yes.
starving.
Oh, and that was a good point you made last night. Yes, he was. You know, at home, anything I didn't finish on my plate, he'd say, "Can I finish your plate?" And he would do that very often when we'd be out with people, because he was hungry. They show in the miniseries. Do you remember the scene where his the older woman who's supposed to be his grandmother comes in the room and he hides the candy bar, and he kept next to his bed at home a drawer filled with picnic bars, which was the famous candy bar in England at the time. And when I'd go in and take a bar without asking, I'd get in big trouble. And I never understood that. Seeing this miniseries helped me understand that. But he would leave the scene, whatever it was, or he would force you to leave the scene so he would not have to relive those moments of abandonment as a child.